Week 8 in the Huddle, the Bucks County Courier Times and the Intelligencers look at high school football in our area. I'm Kevin Cooney from the Courier Times. This is Dom Cosentino from the Intel. Kind of a light week this week in good matchups. I mean, we don't try to downplay matchups, but there's not a lot of attractive games on the docket this week, Dom. So we're going to talk about a column that you wrote as our main topic here. You are calling, and I agree with you on this, for Suburban One League realignment for football. Kind of outline your theory and your proposal and what you think should happen.
Well, 2 years ago, Kev, when the league realigned based mostly on geography to try to bring back some of the rivalries, cut down on the travel expenses and the travel time, that was kind of the idea. But the problem is that football is sort of a different animal. You've got many more players, many more athletes that play football. There's a greater risk for injury with those athletes, and there's a competitive balance that's kind of out of whack, really, and it's partly based on enrollment because North Penn, Neshaminy, and Pennsbury have sort of been the dominant teams not only in the Suburban 1 League but all of District 1. Between the three of them, they've won 7 of the last 8 district titles. So it stands to reason that the league ought to consider, and I said this 2 years ago, and the 2 seasons we've now had have kind of borne it out, that the league ought to reconsider realigning just for football, put those 3 into one league, and then consider maybe a PowerPoint structure even that they could then take a look at every 2 years to kind of move the other teams around and obviously keep some of the smaller American Conference teams together.
Well, let's take, for example, we're at Hatboro Horsham High School here today, by the way, and Hatboro is part of the Continental Conference, and the Continental right now is one team. Right. I mean, it's North Penn, and with all due respect to Souder and all due respect to Quakertown, good football teams, when they go up against that one team that has a huge numbers advantage, Quakertown and North Penn's numbers disadvantage, if you will, is staggering. It's really not a fair fight, is it?
I believe the smallest school in the Continental is around 1,300, so it's more than double. And that disparity, when it comes to a game like football, where you're talking about where you need 22 players on both sides of the ball, the depth comes in handy. North Penn loses a player or two, they can replace them. Some of these smaller schools are not able to do that, and the proof is just in the results. I mean, North Penn was ahead of Quakertown 41-0 last week at the half. That shouldn't happen, given that they're in the same league. I mean, it's going to happen from time to time, but the disparity has just been borne out to be too great between the big schools. North Penn, Pennsbury, and Neshaminy's enrollment is significantly higher than pretty much the rest of the teams in the Continental. And as one SOL AD said to me this week, not for attribution, but it's almost like we're playing to give them trophies.
And when you look at it also, you look at what's happened in the National Conference. Yes, on paper, it looks more balanced this year because the 2 Council Rock schools being better. You have Abington in there, you have Neshaminy, and you have Pennsbury. But in actuality, when you look at the final results, nothing's really changing here. I mean, for all of what we've said so far about how competitive the National Conference has been this year, Pennsbury is is going undefeated, and right now it's going to take a lot for anybody to stop them. And Neshaminy probably is going to end up second. I mean, this is the way people have to understand that there is something here that doesn't fit. And if you're going, the one question I would have is if you're going by true size, if you go by the PIAA numbers, that puts a school like Truman into the mix. What would you do with them? I mean, because right now because of their tech school aspect, they don't have a lot of players on their team. Shouldn't there be a formula that includes maybe players on the team?
And that's what I suggested was,
right.
Every 2 years the PIAA redoes the enrollment numbers. So it's then within the SOL's power when they get those numbers, and they're able to look at the caliber of teams they've got within the league. Granted, nobody in the league is going to want to be placed in the same league as North Penn, Pennsbury, and Neshaminy. 4 or 5 other teams are going to have to do that every year for football. Now, we're talking strictly football. For the other sports, I think the system that they've got works. I made that clear in the column. I think for basketball and cross country, you've got the natural rivalries and everything. But
and there's more travel involved with them too, to be honest. Because teams play home and homes and all that, and a lot of other sports.
Football's once a week, where you generally have 5, 6, maybe 7 home games for most teams, so the travel's less of a consideration. Now, like we were saying, 4 or 5 teams are going to have to be put into a league with North Penn, Pennsbury, and Neshaminy. but the league can come up with a formula or a way of creating kind of a PowerPoint system of some kind to determine which teams will go into the quote-unquote big league. And maybe there's a year where Penridge is having has got some talent and is putting things together, and they can be competitive. CB South, after all, did win the National Conference 2 years ago. It can happen. They were in the right situation at the right time for that to happen.
Hey gang, it's Four Downs, America's favorite quick hit segment, and we'll start by mentioning Lansdale Catholic's first win this week against previously undefeated McDevitt. And Dom, you were there. How big a win was this for LC, just to kind of remove that burden of being winless?
I think as a confidence boost and to remove the burden, like you said, it was huge. This was a team that's been battered by injuries all year. They're going down to play a McDevitt team that had been undefeated, even though they're at the 2A level in the Catholic League. They fall behind 14-0 in the first 4 minutes, find a way to battle back and win. They've gotten a big boost from Devitt Barrett's return from injury. Not to say that LC is going to be able to turn things around this season. They are pretty young, and maybe perhaps it could be a stepping stone toward next year. And one of the big games we do have in the Bucksmont area this week will be Council Rock North playing the Chamonix. Rock North coming off the win against Abington, big win. The Chamonix just one loss. Kev, what are you seeing this week?
The Chamonix playing a lot better defensively, I thought. After they surrendered 2 long runs last week to Greg Welsh, really shut it down the second half. The Chamonix defensively is playing better. They're going to have to stop the Marvel, Hamilton kind of duo right now that's really been effective for North. Big statement game for North because they're not out of the woods yet. They lose this game, they start South on their schedule. They could have 4 losses, and that could be trouble for their playoff standing.
Kevin, one of the interesting things going on, at least in the eastern part of the state this year, is how the 3A bracket for the playoffs is beginning to shape up statewide, at least in the East. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you look at it, you have Archbishop Wood, who's been terrific, went to the East Final, obviously, last year, so they're playoff savvy. You have Pottsgrove, you have Ruston, you have Selinsgrove, you have all these really good teams all together. I think the AAA playoffs could be more interesting to watch in the East than the Quad A, because I think the Quad A, you're going to have the one district, one game, and I'm not sure you're going to have a really compelling matchup in the East Final. I think the entire AAA playoff in the East is going to be terrific to watch. And finally, we know the region is swept up in Phillies fever. Hey, Dom, do they still play baseball in Pittsburgh?
They do still play baseball in Pittsburgh, believe it or not, Kevin. But I'm of the mind that Philadelphia ought to stick to baseball and leave the football and hockey to Pittsburgh. Things just keep Pennsylvania beautiful that way.
Yeah, at least there's a balance here. So we'll be back next week with a full installment and hopefully a lot of good games next week. So we're looking forward to it here in the Huddle. For Dom Cosentino, I'm Kevin Cooney. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.